So since I got into sim racing back in 2018, I've learned a lot about what makes you faster and what doesn't. Competing as a pro across all the different sim titles over the years has exposed me to a lot of different driving techniques. Racing in real life has shown me what translates well and what doesn't. And now I've been coaching other sim racers for around a year. I think overall I've got a pretty good picture of what the most common mistakes are that people make. And there are literally 1,000,001 things that you can do wrong or incorrectly when you're driving. So in this video, we'll narrow it down to the 5 most common mistakes I see people make. And these were also mistakes that I made when I first got into it back in 2018. So there's no shame in making mistakes. So let's have a look and let's get into it. So the first one we're going to talk about is steering. Now, as you can imagine, this is a pretty important one to get right. And the first area I see a lot of people go wrong with steering is the wheel rotation. So across all platforms, I run 900 degrees of wheel rotation. That's in the wheel profile software itself and in the game. And then in game, if there's a car specific rotation option, I always enable that just so that I've got the right rotation for the car I'm driving. I often see a lot of people using like 1080 degrees of rotation or 360 or some really random numbers. And the problem in doing that is if you don't know what you're doing, you risk either over rotating the front tires or under rotating them, and therefore not using the grip that's available to you properly. So yeah, I always think that 900 degrees is a very safe bet. You can use other wheel rotations, but I feel like you need to know what you're doing really. So yeah, 900 is just that safe bet. And yeah, the next point on steering is I see a lot of people not utilising the grip of the front tyres properly. So yeah, either not turning the steering wheel enough and therefore not using the grip that's available to them, or turning the steering wheel too much and going beyond the slip angle of the tyre. And in both cases here, the net result is that the car simply won't turn. So it's important to know which one you're doing, and then after you know and identify that, adjust and then get yourself back into the right window. So yeah, each sim title reacts differently when you get to the slip angle of the tyre. iRacing, for example, is very, very sensitive. So as soon as you go beyond the slip angle of the front tyres, you lose all grip pretty much immediately and you'll just understeer off the track. Assetto Corsa Competizione, for example, is much more forgiving. So if you do get to the slip angle and go beyond it, it's not going to suddenly lose all grip. You can still get the car through the corner, and in some cases it's actually quicker just to wind a load of front lock on to rag the car through the corner. But yeah, overall the point here is that make sure you're turning the front tyres or the front wheels of the car the correct amount. Okay, so the next thing is braking, and yeah, another one of the key inputs when you're driving. The most common mistake I see with braking that people make is they're not braking hard enough, at least within the game or sim they're playing. So yourself in your actual rig, you might really think that you're stamping on that pedal and you can't put any more force into it, but if you haven't calibrated your pedal and set it up properly in game, that's not going to translate into the game itself. And yeah, you don't want it to be crazy hard to get to 100% braking game. You know, if it's too hard to get to 100% during a 1 hour or 2 hour stint, you might suffer leg failure at the end of the stint, which obviously would not be ideal. So it needs to be sustainable. And yeah, just a firm press of the pedal to get to 100% is what you really should aim for, as this will ensure you're maximizing your braking consistently, lap after lap. On the flip side of that, if your brake pedal is too sensitive and too easy to get to 100%, then you'll run into other issues, such as lockups, being in the ABS too much, trail braking will become quite difficult. So there is a sweet spot when you're calibrating your brake pedal. You can go too much, but you can also go too little as well. And yeah, this changes ever so slightly depending on the game and car you're driving. For example, I have Heisenbelt Ultimate Plus pedals currently, and for Assetto Corsa Competizione, I run 40 kilos of brake pressure, which to be honest is quite easy to hit. And the whole reason behind that is in ACC, you want to be hitting 100% brake in game quite a lot, you know, because the ABS is so good, it does all the work for you. Every heavy braking zone, I'm straight to 100%, and then I hold it there for quite a long time before trailing off. Whereas in iRacing, I run my pedal at 60 kilos of force, so it's less sensitive and it takes more work for me to get to 100% brake. And that's because to be fast in iRacing, you don't really want to be getting to 100% braking game, and that's due to the tyre model overheating and there are a few other reasons as well. So yeah, effectively, I always set my rig up around my driving style, and I have different profiles for my wheelbase and my pedals for each game. So when I switch games, I don't actually have to change my driving too much. As I say, the rig does the work. I just get on, load different settings, and I can just drive. But yeah, to summarize then, a lot of people I don't think are calibrating and setting up their brake properly, so they're not maximizing their braking in game. So make sure you do that. Righto, so the next one is track usage. And I think most of us in sim racing, or most of us that do sim racing, understand the racing line and where you roughly need to position the car on track. But track usage is definitely an area where a lot of people still leave time on the table. That although they know where the racing line is, they're still not maximizing every bit of track. And I guess the simplest way to break this down is each corner's got 3 phases: entry, apex, exit. And the question you need to ask yourself is, are you using every millimeter of track at each of those 3 phases at every corner throughout the lap? That's what you need to check. And if you're not, then you need to go back and work on that. Of course, each corner's different curbs, different track limits. Some corners are tighter than others, but the principle remains the same. And, doing this properly, it can really bring down your lap times as it all adds up. Just think, if you're a 10th off per corner on a circuit that has 20 corners, that's 2 seconds a lap. So you don't have to be a lot off per corner for it to add up to a massive gap across one lap. And then if you think during a race stint, if you're 2 seconds a lap off, at the end of the race, you might end up 30 seconds behind the leader. So, it starts to put things into perspective a little bit. See, I think out of all the mistakes in this video, this is the simplest one to rectify because it's kind of simple. Entry, apex, exit, use every millimeter of track you have available to you. But yeah, practice makes perfect, of course. The next thing then is gears. So again, another important input that the driver has control over, and in every corner, more often than not, I'd say there's an optimal gear to be in. And there's 2 ways you can get this wrong. If you're in too lower gear going through a corner, the engine RPM is going to increase, and although this will sound really nice because obviously the engine's singing, the engine braking effect will also increase, and this will slow down the car quite a lot, and this can kill your minimum speed. Effectively, you'll be slow into the corner, but then in theory fast out, but you would have lost a lot of time on the way in. On the flip side though, if you're in a gear too high through a corner, this is also an issue because the car will be unresponsive, it won't turn as you wish going through the corner. If you don't slow the car down enough on the brakes, you'll just understeer straight past the corner. And yeah, the other thing when doing this particular issue is the engine RPM will drop significantly, and then it will likely bog down on the exit, so your acceleration's gonna completely tank and you'll lose even more lap time. So in this instance, you'll be fast in, but slow out. And ideally you wanna be fast in, fast out. And yeah, I think the key thing in getting this particular mistake right is just trial and error. It should be pretty clear after a few tries which gear you need to be in for that corner. Of course, this is going to change per car, and even different drivers, different driving styles might reward using a lower gear or a higher gear through a specific corner compared to someone else, depending on how you drive. But yeah, just find what works best for you. Okay, so the final mistake I see people make quite a lot is around setups, and it's not a driving related thing, it's more of a general approach thing. So I see quite a few drivers who are a few seconds off the ultimate pace delving into the setup to try and find lap time, and honestly I don't think that's the best use of time. Of course, people tweak setups for fun. It's quite an interesting topic. If you're doing it for fun, curiosity, then ignore this, fair play to you, keep doing your thing. But if you're a few seconds off and you're delving into the setup to try and find lap time purely, you're one of those people that doesn't particularly want to go into the setup, but you think it might help. Honestly, I'd just spend your time and energy focusing purely on your driving inputs first to get you closer to the ultimate pace. In this day and age, there's so many setup shops across all the different sim titles. I'm not affiliated with any of them, so I'm not trying to sell you anything, but getting one of these on a specific car and track combo that you're driving to get you started would be my best advice, because you'll only be a few tenths off the ultimate setup. Each setup shop should have a very good idea about, the metas and getting the basics of the setup in place. So you can forget about the setup and purely focus on your driving inputs. And you'll be amazed at how much more time you can find in your inputs, your steering, throttle, brake, gears, racing line, all the other stuff. You'll find way more time in that stuff than you will clicking around in the setup. So there we go. Those, I'd say, are the 5 most common mistakes I see in sim racing that prevent people getting faster. So I hope some of you found it useful, and yeah, fingers crossed it helps some of you find some raw pace and or consistency. If you guys feel like I've missed anything or have any questions, then get down in the comments below. I will see you down there, and I hope you all enjoyed the video. Leave a like if you did, subscribe to the channel if you really enjoyed it, and I will see you lot next time. Adios.